Do you ever find yourself not speaking up or keeping quiet, like biting your tongue? Maybe you avoid asking for something that you know that you need and pretend that you don't need it, or try to get your needs met in and around somebody else, like to avoid conflict maybe. Or maybe you find yourself saying yes when you really mean no, like it's no because it's not in your best interest, no because you don't have the time, or no because you just don't want to, but for some reason you can't seem to get those words out of your mouth. If you nodded along with any of those examples, you may have some trouble with something called self-abandoning. There are a number of terms for this, like people pleaser, self-sacrificer, being a yes person, even being a doormat. Regardless of the term that you use to describe this behavior, though, the impact on your life is significant. Hi, my name is Heather, and I'm a relationship and empowerment coach, and I love working with people to help them distinguish those barriers and blind spots that they put in the way and stop them from having the life and love that they truly desire. In service of that, today we're going to talk about something called self-abandonment. We're going to talk about what it is, how to identify when it's at play in your life, and then what you can do about it to stop the impact that it has. A while back, I was in a situation where I had to choose. I had to choose me, and that meant choosing not you or not something else, which is rarely felt as an easy thing to do. The reason I was put in this position was that the thing that I wanted wasn't actually available. A version of what I wanted was available, but not the actual thing that I wanted. See, what I wanted was a committed, intimate relationship, an opportunity to build real partnership with someone. And when it came down to it, he wasn't available for that. And the tough part was that he kept saying that he was, despite the fact that his actions never really lined up with it. I really liked him, so I wanted to believe what he said, not the actions. And that was kind of hard. When I've previously been in similar situations, one strategy I tried was to ignore the fact that I knew that this wasn't available, that this commitment wasn't available. You know what I mean? Like, I'd convinced myself that if I could just be a little bit more of this or a little bit less of that, that he'd come around. If I could just be more patient, if I could just be a little bit more fun, or whatever the thing was, he'd come around, he'd see what a great person I was, and then, things would move. But it didn't work. Basically, I was denying my intuition, my inner knowing that this situationship wasn't actually for me, that this wasn't going to become the kind of relationship I wanted because he wasn't emotionally available. Instead of allowing that to be true and then taking action that was in my best interest, I'd cling to or focus on any little sign that I could interpret as progress towards what it was that I wanted. Almost like I was collecting proof that what he was saying was true instead of what he was actually showing. It was like taking notice of and adding more weight to the times when he did show up, which wasn't very often. So it was a really disproportionate collection of evidence. And also telling myself that, if I could just be a little bit more patient, if I could just be a little bit more forgiving, eventually things would turn out in our favor. Insert eye roll here, really. Of course, it never really went that way because it wasn't an option for him. He wasn't in a space where he was emotionally available and ready for a relationship. And every time I ignored my inner knowing and focused on some little breadcrumb that he was going to come around or that things were going to go our way, I was abandoning myself. Man, denying that inner knowing can be painful, can't it? The number of times I've ignored that inner knowing or just completely blocked it out is too many to count, and the impact is significant. Sadly, until that moment, it was really the only consistent pattern that I'd had in my relationships: self-abandoning, abandoning myself in service of something else, abandoning myself in service of the possibility that I would have a relationship with someone. What I see now is that I was often trying to get someone else to like me or approve of me or love me, tell me that I was good enough, to choose me. But that's not up to them. It's up to me to choose me. And this time I did. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But that was the beginning of the road to me finally choosing myself on the regular. All that time I'd spent trying to please other people so that they would like me and then maybe I'd feel like I mattered was never actually going to make me feel worthy. That could never truly come from someone else. Until I believed in myself that I mattered, it would be impossible for me to believe that when it was coming from someone else, when someone else was trying to tell me that I mattered. It wouldn't ring true because it didn't align with what my beliefs were about myself. This pattern of allowing another's needs or opinions to carry more weight than your own, and then doing whatever you need to keep the other person happy and engaged in the relationship, it's called self-abandonment or self-betrayal, and it sucks. Self-abandonment is when you reject, ignore, suppress parts of yourself, your needs, your limits, your wants, your boundaries, in order to do something like maintain a relationship or avoid conflict or get people to like you. The trouble is, until we start to do our own work, we don't often see that what we're doing is making a choice to abandon ourselves in these situations. It just seems like that's how it is, and I don't even understand what I'm doing wrong. Why do I keep getting the results with this total blind spot that what I'm doing is abandoning myself? It can seem like it's just normal or the reality of how things are, that we have to take what we can get or compromise and settle. That can become what our reality feels like when we tend to self-abandon. If this is resonating with you so far, I bet if you look further into your life, you'll see that this doesn't just apply to your intimate or romantic relationships. It's probably rampant in your life, because how you do anything is how you do everything. I bet if you look, you'll be able to see that this is in your friendships, it's in your family, it's in how you handle money, it's in your sexual relationships, it's in your career, it's everywhere. If you abandon yourself in one place, you'll do it in other areas too, and you're not alone. In our culture, most of us have been conditioned to acquiesce or to yield to another person. Don't talk back. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass me. Children should be seen and not heard. Be quiet. Quit bitching. Quit being so grumpy. Quit being so rude. Quit being so bitchy. You should do this instead of that thing. Don't rock the boat. I mean, you get the idea, right? You've likely been receiving messages like this your whole life, and those messages are telling you that how you feel is less important, less relevant than how someone else feels. A couple of caveats here before I continue. First, I want to be clear, at least most of the time, I don't think people do that or try to give you that message intentionally, make you feel like your feelings are less than. Generally speaking, people who are doing things like that are not aware of it, and they're operating from their own wounded consciousness. They haven't done their work. However, regardless of why someone is doing this, doesn't mean that you can let them off the hook or should let them off the hook. And also, it's not a reason for you to continue to allow them to behave that way towards you, because it's not okay. Second, I agree that there are times when this message is simply required. There are definitely times and places where how you feel does take a back seat, and that's reasonable. The trouble lies in the consistency and the frequency of that message over a period of time. If you're in a relationship with someone where the messaging is consistently put your needs down, your needs don't matter, my needs are more important, that's really an imbalance, regardless of the type of relationship that you're in. And so that might be something you want to take into consideration. When you're constantly being told in one way or another that your feelings and needs are less than, and then being rewarded for adjusting your behavior, what you need or desire to meet another person's needs, you'll internalize this as a truth. It'll start to turn into how you feel and what you need is less important or less relevant than any other. Self-abandonment is a corrosive, toxic tendency, and it will kill off your sense of self and self-esteem. When it has a grip on you, the dreams you have, the life you want, the love you want are really unavailable in any kind of authentic way. In fact, you may not even be conscious of those things, like what your dreams are, what you truly want for yourself in your life. You can't build the life you actually want by continuing to compromise and betray yourself. It doesn't work that way. Side note here, this is one of the key ways we learn to avoid conflict. So if you grew up in a household where people didn't have conflict, they didn't talk to each other when things went wrong, so you never saw how to have constructive conflict modeled, it's quite normal for you to develop a self-abandonment tendency. If you grew up in a household where there was a lot of volatility, it's quite normal for you to develop this as a way of coping and avoiding creating what you saw when you were a little person. When we're rewarded for adjusting our behavior to suit another person's, especially when we're little, we learn that making someone else feel good or feel better is more important than how we feel. And we can internalize that someone else's praise for being a good boy or being a good girl is love when it's not. But love is the thing that little people need, so you'll go seeking it, and no wonder you get confused. That then becomes part of how you view the world. When I'm a good boy or girl and take care of someone else's feelings, I receive love. In other words, in order to be loved by others, I need to quiet my voice and myself. If we're self-abandoners, inevitably we will learn to get our needs met in and around everyone else's, and it just becomes the norm to put other people and their needs ahead of ours and abandon ourselves. But regardless of where we learned it, let's look at how it's actually showing up in your life today. What are you not saying? What are you keeping quiet or biting your tongue about? What are you not asking for? What are you pretending that you don't need, you can get by without? What are you taking care of on your own in and around someone else's needs instead of putting your needs as a priority? What are you working around to avoid conflict? And where are you saying yes when you really mean to say no? When you take those things into consideration, you'll really want to ask yourself some hard questions like, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Do I feel confident and self-assured? Do I feel truly valued in my relationships? Do I feel empowered? Do I believe or trust that I am loved and worthy? Am I comfortable in my own skin? When we put our own needs second or last, we'll never fully feel any of those things. Like, never feel it anyway, like it's the truth. We may hear it, but it won't resonate in our bodies like it's true. Choosing you when you've lived as a self-abandoner is not easy or comfortable. It'll likely rock some boats and change some relationships, but at the same time, the end results will rock your world in a really positive way. So then the question becomes, how do I stop doing this? How do I stop self-abandoning and betraying myself? Well, first off, this is a problem you can't fix from the outside in. This is a pattern of behavior that is deeply rooted in your subconscious and can't be fixed with just like making a decision you're not going to do it anymore. The first step is recognizing that you have the pattern that you want to change and then choosing to do the work to shift your tendencies to self-abandon. This in and of itself is a courageous step. Then it's a matter of staying committed and doing the work, and that'll take time and a tremendous amount of compassion and grace with yourself. If you're looking for specific steps, one thing I'd recommend to start with for sure is journaling. Often when I say this, people will roll their eyes and nod politely, knowing they'll never do it. I have absolutely been that person. But if this is you, I invite you to consider that continuing to do it your way by not journaling will only continue to get you more of the results that you currently have, the ones you don't want. So maybe it's time to try something new. In your journal, the first thing you want to do is start noticing where you're self-abandoning and then ask yourself these questions. What's happening in the situation right before I self-abandon? What does it feel like in my body right before and then right during the situation and then right after I self-abandon? What was I trying to avoid in the situation by self-abandoning? How does self-abandoning leave me feeling about myself? And go into more detail here than just like crap, because you really want to get down to, I resent myself, I lose respect for myself, it makes me feel worthless. Like, you really want to dig down into that space as opposed to just a high level label. And then finally, another question here is, how does it leave me feeling about the person and the situation after I self-abandon? Once you've started to build the awareness of where you do this in your life, why you do it, and how it makes you feel, you can really start asking yourself some questions like, where did I learn to self-abandon? Who modeled this behavior for me? When I was young, who was I trying to please or take care of emotionally? When I was young, what was I afraid of happening if I stood my ground for my needs, my wants, my limits, and my boundaries? Like, what would have happened if I did that? That'll probably give you some pretty good insight into why this behavior has become such an intrinsic part of your life. The next step here is starting to change the behavior, practicing making those changes in the places where you would normally self-abandon. And that is not easy to do for sure. But when you get to this place, when you get to this point in the process, I would recommend first that you write out, yes, more journaling, that you write out how you would prefer these types of situations to go in the future. You can think about some of the ones that are the hardest or some of the ones that have been the most painful for you in the past. And if you could go back in a time warp and redo them, what would you have said instead? What would you have done instead? It gives you an idea of where you want to go in the future, which is helpful for your brain in your conscious mind, and it's also helpful for your subconscious mind when you have a clear target to aim for. Next, I'd take a specific situation that you're dealing with. It could be one that you know is coming up or one that you're currently trying to navigate. And this might be something where you've like just self-abandoned and you want to go back and fix the conversation. And it could be one where you know that you usually self-abandon in this situation or with this person, and so you want to do it differently this time. And then in your mind's eye, imagine how you want things to go. So what would you say differently? What would you do differently? And how would you respond to what they have to say to you? And just imagine how that would go. Then write it all down. That helps your brain remember it better. There's something that happens, it fires different synapses in your brain when you actually spend the time to handwrite something out versus typing or texting or just thinking. So that'll be helpful when you're in the moment trying to recall the things that you wanted to say. If you've taken the time to write it out ahead of time, that'll make a big difference for you. And another thing that can make a really big difference in these situations is actually practice speaking the words out loud. When your lips and your tongue are used to saying the words or have practiced saying the phrases a few different times, it's easier for you to do that in the moment than if you're trying to say it for the very first time, trying to say, I understand that's how you feel and that doesn't work for me, is really hard to do the first time you're confronting changing the behavior of self-abandonment. And it's even harder if you've never practiced saying something like that before. And then it's just a matter of repeating the process over and over, and it will take time. So be gentle with yourself. This isn't something that you just do one time and then it's done. It's something that'll take time for you to be able to start integrating and rewiring or reprogramming yourself as someone who doesn't self-abandon in those moments. So be gracious. Something else to keep in mind here, which can be a bit of a surprise to people, is that doing this work will make you feel physically uncomfortable. Your nervous system will tell you that you're in danger when you do this in real life. That nervous system response can look different for different people, but that's essentially what your nervous system is telling you. Because you've been self-abandoning for so long, your nervous system has acclimated to that as the normal way things go. So when you go and do something different, like set a boundary or say no, your nervous system will perceive this change of behavior and the anticipated outcome as a threat and respond in kind with the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. It's totally normal, and it can be one of the hardest parts about making these changes is telling your body in the moment or overriding the natural reaction in your body with what you've created in your journal. So that's part of the reason the journaling work is so important, to know what you're going to do ahead of time when you're feeling that stress response. It can make it so much easier to deal with in the moment. Then you get to remind yourself that what you're doing is taking care of you, that the continued self-abandoning, that's actually where the problem is if you look at the whole course of your life, and giving yourself permission to, despite what my body is telling me, make the choice around, I'm doing this in service of myself. It's like stepping outside of your comfort zone and trying something new. If you've never bungee jumped before, when you get up onto, I've never bungee jumped, but bear with me, when you get up on the platform and start putting the harness on and they start, locking you in, and you hear all the clips of the things and so on and so forth, and you're standing on the edge and you're looking down, your body is having a very serious reaction to, don't do this, this is dangerous. Of course, because it can tell that you're putting yourself at risk or a perceived risk. It's kind of the same thing in these sorts of situations. You may not be standing on the edge of a bridge ready to jump off and hope that the bungees work, but you are sort of metaphorically jumping into what could be an abyss and creating some mess inside of a relationship, and we often try to avoid that. So giving yourself permission to stick it out and follow through with the plan, even when it's uncomfortable, will be a huge gift to yourself. Essentially, stopping self-abandoning requires that you get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's the place where most people get stuck, but it's necessary if you want to change this pattern. This is where you have to remind yourself that you are worth this risk. You are worth this discomfort, and then boldly go forth in service of yourself for a change. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you found some helpful information for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. That way you'll never miss another video. Thanks again for watching. I look forward to seeing you the next time.